everyone, and welcome to You're In Detention. And this week we have a very special guest joining us, Sophie. So thank you. Hello, Sophie. We are delighted to be talking about medication this week, and medication versus unmedicated and all sorts of stuff around that topic. So really pleased to be discussing this because it's something that people have been asking us to talk about on the podcast for a while. So delighted for you to join us, Sophie. And make sure, if you are really enjoying these podcasts, please share them across your network, because particularly the RSD one we did a couple of weeks ago, it's had about 2,800 views now, and it's really starting to get to the people that need to see it. This is another really important topic that people will be really benefit from hearing about. And thank you again, Sophie, for coming and sharing your journey with us, because we know the medication can be a real personal story. So let's hand over to you, Sophie, just to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are.
Hello. So I am Sophie. I am a mum of 3 children, all neurodiverse, and I am also neurodiverse. I'm autistic and ADHD. With a late diagnosis. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 36, so kind of went through my whole life being undiagnosed, thinking that there was something more. And yeah, I've just started my own coaching company, coaching neurodiverse women. So it's all very exciting.
Good. And I think you're just now at the start, very early stages of your medication journey, aren't you? So from diagnosis and through to medication, it'd be really interesting to hear firstly about how you went about your diagnosis, because it might be different how I went about mine. And I think there's so many questions about that at the moment, particularly with the waiting lists being closed or 8 years long. And then how that kind of transpired into then your decision to go on to medication, and really how that happened.
Mm. So it's been a long process. Um, so I kind of always knew that there was something different with me. And I always found that I struggled so much more than I found other people struggling. And I didn't really understand why. And then I was diagnosed with OCD I think I was about 18 at this point, but prior to that was diagnosed with dyslexia from a young age, and anxiety. But it was totally missed the ASD and ADHD. My mum actually said that when I was about 10, she took me to see CAMS, and they were like, no, absolutely, we don't see any of that. She's just a really anxious young lady. She'll grow out of it. And so kind of sent us off on our way, and that was that. And I struggled sort of throughout my childhood and teenage years and young adulthood, and not really knowing who I was, and learned to mask and try and fit into every sort of situation. Um, but always knew that there was something more, and so did my mum, but it was just pushed down, that we just sort of left it. And then I had my children, and I started, and this is something that you hear quite a lot, that you see your children and a lot of what they do, you did, and so you start sort of questioning, okay, and sort of look into it a little bit further. Prior to coaching, I worked for an autism key working service. And so I was amongst, obviously, lots of professionals and sort of different services and stuff. And at that point, I sort of thought, I really think that particularly my middle child is autistic and ADHD. So we went down the process of getting diagnosis for him. We did get him on the standard pathway, because there's there's 3 pathways, privately through your standard NHS pathway, and then through Right to Choose. With the standard pathway through NHS, that was, I think it was about 6 years that we would need to wait for his diagnosis. Um, but I went ahead anyway, and put him on the long waiting list. But it was getting so challenging, and nobody was really listening. Teachers weren't really paying attention. They kind of dismissed it. And so that's when I went down the route of Right to Choose, and then did it for myself. because as you mentioned earlier, the wait list for adults is even longer, and I just couldn't wait that long. So went down the route of right to choose. Do you want me to speak about how I did that, or do you want me to?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's so important because a lot of people don't know about right to choose and what that is. So yeah, we'd love you to share that with everyone.
So it's basically there's lots of different businesses, organizations, clinics that um I don't actually know whether you call it businesses. What do you call it?
Hmm.
I think now different path different options of pathways and which you want to kind of choose. And so I went to the GP and just said, I've heard about right to choose. I know it's a quicker wait than your standard pathway. Um, and I've actually looked and I've chosen the service that I want. That's it, service. That's an
Yeah.
ADHD brain that I completely forgot the word.
Don't worry, we've got a name threader that runs across the bottom. I use it frequently.
Yeah. So chose my service. You can actually go on the NHS website, and if you type in right to choose, it comes up with lots of different services that you can choose.
Mm.
I went. Do you want me to say where I went? Which one I
If
chose? Or-
you're happy to share, it'd be brilliant for people.
yeah. So I chose clinical partners. I chose that one because the wait list at that point was only 3 months. So yeah, I was like, oh, I need to do this one, and I'd heard good reviews about it. So yeah, so I went and filled out all the relevant forms through my GP, and then my GP then sent off why I felt it was necessary for me to go and have the diagnosis of autism and ADHD. Kind of spoke a little bit about my childhood and the things that I noticed within myself, and then into teenage years, adulthood. And then I waited and got my appointment for my assessment for, I think I had my ADHD one first.
Mm.
It was all done virtually. And then I then had my autism assessment after that. I think they didn't tell me straight away after my assessment whether they thought that I was autistic or ADHD, which was quite stressful because you have to then wait and you're like, I just want to know. Um,
Yeah,
and I think also, even though and know, like I knew I was autistic, so I
yeah.
was expecting to be told I was. At the back of my mind, I worried that they'd miss it because I'm so good at masking. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, so anyway, I had about 4 weeks later, I think it was, they rang and said, yep, so we're diagnosing you with autism and ADHD. They went through the reasons why. And then I think it was another 4 weeks after that that they then sent the report through, very, very detailed report of how the assessment went and why they felt that I was autistic and ADHD. Um,
Sophie, can I
mm,
just ask you a question? Sorry to,
mhm.
because I think at that point I can remember getting that. I got it in an email, and it was a big long letter. And how did you feel at that point?
Oh, so many emotions. The first emotion was relief because I finally was like, yes, like what I thought all along is actually what it is, and I'm finally
Mm.
felt seen. Um,
Yes.
I also grieved for my past life of being undiagnosed and all the trauma that I had experienced from living in this neurotypical world without being diagnosed and no one understanding and supporting me in the right way, which caused trauma throughout my life. And so I grieved, and I spent quite a while grieving and reliving my past and going, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I know why I did that, and I know how I felt about this and why I did this. And then I felt a bit of anger because I was like, oh, it should have been picked up. And it's
Yeah.
not right that it's not picked up. Um, and then and now and still now, I feel so content. Like the thing is, when you get told whether you are autistic and ADHD, it very much is like you're told and that's that. Like there's then nothing, in my experience anyway. You
Mhm.
kind of just then left to go, off you go now and just
Yeah.
that information in, and there you go, that's you, woo. And you kind
Big
of then
vacuum, isn't it? Yeah, it's like, what am I supposed to do? You're sitting there with all these emotions, and you're like,
mm,
"Well, who could I talk to?"
yeah, and what next? What does this mean now? What do I do? Um,
Yeah.
and I think, had I not at that time been working for an autism key working service, I think I'd have felt really scared, because I was amongst it and I could ask people questions, and I was learning as I was going, and I had the resources there to help me. That made it so much easier for me. But had I done this without working there, I'd have felt really, I don't know, just a little bit lost and a little bit like, well, what do I do now? And I knew, so I've been on antidepressants now for, well, gosh, I can't even, since I was 18, and I'm now 38. So a long, long time. And obviously I came off them whilst pregnant with my 3 children. But I always kind of knew that that wasn't the right medication for me. And at one point it was, and I had postnatal depression, and with my second child, and I was really poorly. And I needed it then. But prior to that and after that, I didn't, but I needed something and I didn't know what. Um, so when I had my ADHD diagnosis, I was like, I feel personally for me, that ADHD medication would be suited better for me than antidepressants, because I don't
Yeah.
feel depressed. You know, there is
Yeah.
time for you, but I don't, day to day, I don't feel depressed. So I don't, and yes, it helps my anxiety, but I thought ADHD would be better for me. Um,
It's
so
really common, isn't it? It's really common for people to have been on, anxiety, depressants, or that medication, um, for years and years and years. I was only talking to someone the other day who'd been on it for, what, 20 years? Um, and they've just been diagnosed with ADHD, female as well. It's been missed predominantly in females, I think, for years and years and years. It's just it's yeah, no wonder we feel a bit like aggrieved by the situation. You know, I think it's interesting to get your view as well. When I went through my diagnosis, Sophie, one of the things that I I was kind of dealing with all the stuff that you'd said, going through all the grief, going through the relief, the grief that answers, and everything else. But outside of that, because I was working in corporate organisation at the time, but outside of that, I knew other people with ADHD, some diagnosed, some undiagnosed, and I knew that people were really afraid to talk about it in a corporate world, because they didn't want to be judged and that. But one of the things that kept coming up over and over again was people saying, "Oh, you've got a label now. You wanted a label." And I thought, wow, imagine any other person going to get a diagnosis for what is a disability, and someone saying, "Oh, you wanted a label." I mean, that was probably one of the toughest parts of it for me, like having to then justify why I wanted that diagnosis and why I wanted answers for
mm,
what in my case was 47 years worth of not knowing.
mm, mm. And I was similar actually, and a lot of people, and still people now say, why did you feel the need to get a diagnosis? You've gone this long in your life. Why now? And I'm like, I cannot tell you how much it has completed me. Like, it's completed me, and it's made sense. And I can finally now understand myself and actually love myself, because for years I
Yeah.
hated my brain. I hated
Mhm.
it. Um, and now I'm kinder to myself, because when I burn out or when I feel overwhelmed in social situations, I I understand that, and I can put strategies in place to help myself. Whereas before I just didn't know. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm quite passionate about helping people and educating people on autism and ADHD, and people's kind of perception of it. And do you know what? I also had that kind of perception and didn't really understand it before I had my children.
Mhm.
Um and I do feel that until you kind of live it, it's so hard to understand it, because how can you understand it?
Yeah.
But
It's so invisible, isn't it? It was interesting. Sorry, my Siri decided it wants to join in the conversation. Um, eh, it's interesting because Kerry, one of our ex-work colleagues, had said to Kerry, Oh, can you tell Jo has got ADHD now? You're working really closely with her, didn't she, Kerry?
Yeah.
It was really interesting, that view that I was be able to mask it to other people in an organisation completely. But Kerry, it's interesting when you've been working closely with me,
Yeah.
how you can see it.
And I can see it, but I can see, for me, I get all of the positive, like so many positives from it. So
Mostly.
kind of days when you are so super hyper focused, but we get to the back end of the day and it's like we've done weeks worth of planning, work, whatever it may be. But you're also really attuned to things like my mood. And I think that's such a strength. I think we can just speak to each other and you're so attuned to how I might be feeling or thinking. Um, but yeah, I think it's interesting. People seem to think you had a, like much more of a mask than I think you did in
Mhm.
our corporate roles. Because oh, can you really tell now? Well, no, it's still Joe, and it's still the same. But I'm just more aware of how you work, what powers you through, and also I know when we're going to have our most productive days.
And it's never in the morning. So Kerry knows not to expect anything from me for the hours of at least 10 o'clock in the morning. And but it's so strange though, isn't it? And this is what we were saying, Sophie. Everyone has this different idea because there's just a bit of a lack of education out there. And I was one of those people, like you say, because I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know I had ADHD, didn't have a clue. Taught boys with ADHD before, and it was very obvious, very externally hyperactive, and I still wouldn't have had any inclination that I had it. But the interesting journey, though, isn't it? And I think that the biggest gift that you can receive is the making sense of yourself part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That has definitely been the biggest thing for me, that although I do feel sad for myself that I had to go through most of my life being undiagnosed, I've still got the rest of my life and I'm still young and I can like now, don't get me wrong, it's really, really hard and tough. And there is days where I'm just like, why? My brain's so tiring. But then
Yeah,
equally, there's days where I'm like, I would like if someone said you could take your brain out now and change it, I would absolutely not. I love my
yeah,
brain. Like it's frustrating, but also there's some fantastic, amazing things about it as well. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it is hard for people to understand. And like Kerry mentioned, with the really kind of being in tune with people's emotions and and reading the room so deeply, I've always been like that, even all my life, even from a young child. My mum always said I was so deeply like emotional and spiritual, and
Mhm,
she's like, it's like you've come from somewhere else because she didn't know about my ADHD and autism, and I assumed prior to my diagnosis that autistic people and ADHD people didn't have that. They didn't have a deep emotional connection and
mhm.
found it hard to show emotions and understand emotions. But actually, it's like everyone's different. But for me personally, I'm completely the opposite to that. It's interesting. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't realize that.
I think you pick up, don't you, on people. I think it's through a lifetime of probably criticisms as well. It makes you more attuned to everything that's going on in your environment because you very much you're either you've been in an environment where it's been very critical, like at school. That makes you really heightened to situations and that emotional. When someone's kind of like cross at you or not happy with you, and it's very very easy to pick that up. And sometimes it's easy to pick it up when it doesn't exist as well. Because like, "Huh, you've just sent me a text message that says okay, right." Well, obviously, and then it starts playing into the RSD, which we talked about the other week. But so, what you just said there as well, that how some days it's so hard, isn't it? And this morning, before this podcast, I knew that I'd got a time limit, so it was perfect for me because I felt like, right, I can get so much stuff done now in an hour that you wouldn't believe. But I find that I'm kind of like on a circuit. Someone explained it to me like this before, and I didn't know what they meant. But I do realise because I'd like opened the dishwasher to empty that. And then as I got something out and went to another part of the kitchen to put it away, I then saw something else and I thought, "Oh, right, I haven't taken my tablets this morning." So I went to the fridge then to get a glass of water to take my tablets, and in the fridge I saw something I needed thrown away. So I got that out of the fridge to go and throw it away, and then I thought the bin needs emptying, so I've got the bin out, and then I walked out to take the bin, and I thought I haven't fed the dog, and it literally went on like that, and then before you know it, I've got all these little jobs on the go, and they'd all get done, but it's like one just triggers this like thing to go and do something else. But like they're the most basic things that are really quite challenging and take quite a lot of effort.
Mm.
But we can do things that are amazing that are quite actually challenging. We find really easy, but yeah, I think it'd be interested to get your view on whether medication actually helps you be more kind of like focused on the one thing that you're doing. But uh, going back to your medication then, Sophie, I know we do like to go off on tangents because this is an ADHD, a neurodivergent podcast, so we're allowed to do that whenever we want. Um, but you went down the right to choose route and you got your diagnosis, which is fantastic. And I think right to choose is really great information. Can I just ask you one question on that? Did you, when you do right to choose, just in case anyone wants to know, do you have to get a referral from your GP first to go down that route?
Yeah. So what I did was I went on the NHS website, chose which service I wanted to go with. I then called them and they sent me, but you can do this via their website. You don't actually have to call them. Their form, like pre-questionnaire form. I filled that out, took that to my GP, said this is the service that I want to go with. And then they then ask you the questions of why, and they then send off your form and their form, and then you wait to hear from the service. So yeah, you have to go through your GP. Yes, you
Yeah,
do. You can't self-refer. You have to go through your GP.
yeah. It was interesting because someone was asking me the other day, they are doing an ADHD diagnosis form for their son, grown-up son, adult son.
Mm,
And I think they're finding it really challenging, and I understand that because the process of getting diagnosed, and I can only talk about the ADHD diagnosis, but I found incredibly challenging because it's a lot of it's paperwork that you have to then print off and scan in and all that, but also that you have to get, they asked me to get someone that I'd known throughout my life to fill it in as well. They had a separate form to fill in, but I really found that challenging because I was 47 at the time, and I'm like, okay, so my parents knew me as a child and they know me now, but day to day they don't live with me and they don't work with me and stuff like that. So I'd got one of my someone that worked for me at the time very closely to fill it in as a different perspective. And
mm,
I think the conversation that was having the other night, she was worried that her son wasn't putting enough detail on the form, and I said, "Look, don't worry about it. Like that's part of the diagnosis. If you write a really really detailed form, I mean, there's no way I'd be filling it in with any detail. That don't overthink it because how you fill it in is how you fill it in. But I think she felt under pressure as a mother to she was worried about writing things that might be hard for her son to read. And I think my advice were to her and to anyone else filling it in was you need to be really truthful and maybe just talk to your son about the fact, he's not going to be surprised. I wasn't surprised by what mine said, but I think part of the diagnosis, you can't be like dressing stuff up and masking stuff for them. It does need to say, I mean, mine said on mine, Joanne made absolutely no effort at school, and
mm,
that's what it looked like, and
mm,
that's what you need to say because that's what it said, and maybe it's hard to read.
mm,
But
mm,
I don't know how you found that part of the diagnosis, just because
mm.
people are asking about it.
Do you know what? It is hard. It's really exhausting when you're having to fill out forms. And there's a lot of forms that I have to fill out for my children to get support, and everything's so lengthy and long, and it's so hard to start it. And then when you
Mm,
do, you're always having to focus on the negative things, the difficulties. And
yes.
it is really hard because you're having to highlight all those things that you struggle with, and it is really emotional having to do it, but it's also, and when I was doing it, I kept reminding myself that I'm doing this because I need to know for myself and my children whether we are ADHD and autistic.
Yeah.
So, but it was hard. And I think my children, when I was doing their assessment, they were too young to really do it with me. And so it was quite separate. And there wasn't
Yeah.
really any time where they had to hear what I had to say.
Yeah.
But when I had my ADHD and autism assessment, my mum and my husband also had their point of view. Um, and it was hard, especially when I saw my mum getting upset, because
Yeah.
it's hard to see, your loved ones feel the same way, and have to
Mm.
talk about these really painful areas of your life that you struggle with.
And then
Um,
they feel guilty, don't they? Because they think that they've missed something and, it wasn't known so much then.
Absolutely, and actually, that's exactly it. My mum, she often, so now that I've kind of started my coaching journey, and I'm kind of sharing more in depth now, to the wider people and out there, and I'm quite vocal about it, and I'm proud to be autistic and ADHD,
Right.
and I talk a lot about it. And my mum often will text me and be like, "Oh, I'm really sad that, like, I've missed it, and I feel really bad, and da 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 da," and will often say, "I should have done this, and I should have done that." And I was like, "No, you did everything
Mhm.
and more to support me. It's not your fault that you went and tried to seek help and you were shut down. That's
Yeah.
not your fault. You did everything and more to support me, and still do." And
Exactly.
but it's really hard, because they take on a lot of guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really tough, isn't it?
Mm,
And so from your diagnosis then, how did you then embark on the medication journey? Because that's a law upon itself, isn't it? We've had, people are paying a fortune for medication at the moment because they haven't got shared care. Shared care, I believe, is not even available in, I think it's Wales. Someone was saying that their daughter was struggling because there wasn't shared care available. Don't quote me on that because I'm sure it was Wales, but my brain has a tendency to forget the information. But I'm sure she said it wasn't available. And there's all sorts of challenges with people worried about taking the medication, getting, changing meds and getting psychosis and all sorts. I know Kerry's, you know, some experience with this, with,
mm,
people we've led in our teams where they've struggled with medication. I'm
Yeah.
quite
mm,
worried then. Tell us
mm.
about how your journey went with that.
So initially, and this is one thing that I was a little bit concerned about, was that they said to me, once you've got your diagnosis, we can't then support you with medication. You'd have to go back to your GP and go through the standard pathway to then get your medication. And that could be a long time, like
Wow.
years. So I was like,
Wow.
oh my goodness. So I've been told that I have ADHD, but now there's nothing that I can really do to support and help me. And yes, there's other ways, but for me, medication was something that I was always very open to. And weirdly, I'm quite funny with, like, I won't even take paracetamol. I'm a bit like, I'm fine, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So it was, but it was just something that I know would have and does help me. So I was a bit like, oh, okay. And at this point, there was a lot of shortage in the medication. So
Mm.
actually, I sort of sat back and thought, well, even if I was on it right now, would I be able to get it anyway? And so that's a whole nother ball game. So I was a little bit like confused. I didn't really know where to go with it. And then I think about 6 months later, they rang me, the clinical partners, and said, "We're now doing the triage medication, shared care. Would you want it?" And I was like, "Yes, yeah, 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 please." Um, so then I waited a few more months because there was a big wait. Well, I say big wait list. 2 months is nothing compared to what you can
Yeah.
wait. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and so then they contacted me, and I was allocated a consultant who saw me fortnightly. And I went on a non-stimulant ADHD medication initially. Um, and I didn't have a very positive experience with it at all, and had really bad high blood pressure with it, and don't know whether this was connected, but I had a migraine attack which mimicked a mini stroke.
Oh
um,
gosh.
could have been from high blood pressure. It's unknown, but it was very it all happened at the same time. So
Mm.
the clinician took me off that straight away and said, no, can't use that one. So it's very trial and error, and that it can feel quite frustrating to begin with. So then they've then put me on, and I had to have a big break between that to kind of keep an eye on my blood pressure, um, just kind of monitor how I am, health wise, and then they would then relook at. But I had to go back to my GP to have my blood pressure and everything done for them to go, "Yep, she's good now. You can sort her out the next medication." So
Mm.
I'm now on, which is fairly recent, a stimulant this time. So when I take it, it will slowly wear out of my body throughout the day. So if I start it in the morning, by the evening, it should, have come out of my body. Um, and yeah, it's a tricky one because for ADHD, I just forget everything all the time. I forget appointments, I forget what day it is. And so to try and take medication in the morning as well is so hard, like so tricky. Um, and there's been a few times where I've took it at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and then not been able to sleep all night. It's not very good. And I'm trying to learn to get into a new pattern of taking it in the morning, but I have PDA as well. So demand is another difficulty and having another demand. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm getting there. And what I would say with this one is that so far, touch wood, um, I it's very different. I've had no issues with high blood pressure, no headaches, nothing actually anything negative. And what I have noticed, and I am on a very, very low dosage, so they start very low. I'm on 20 milligram, and then I do that for a month and a half, and then I go on to 30, and
Yeah.
then it see how I'm feeling, and then a potential to go up higher. But I'm on 20 at the moment, so it's very, very low dosage. But already I have noticed that, like you mentioned, Joe, before, how you will start making a cup of tea and then you'll see something and go, and you're just going and bitting and bobbing everywhere. That's very much
Yeah.
my life. And I have noticed that when and since being on these medications, that I'm a little bit clearer. So I can do a task at a time, which is really strange. So I'll make a cup of tea. Hot.
Without emptying the bin.
Yeah,
What?
yeah, honestly. So I can actually do task by task now. And when I haven't remembered to take my medication, and this is one good thing about this medication, is that if I forget it, it's actually okay. But if I forget to take my antidepressants, it's not good because it needs to be a
Yes.
repeated thing that I take. So this is helpful for me, but I have then noticed that how much more I do struggle when I'm not taking my medication. Um, so yeah, so far with this particular one, and I'm happy to tell you. Do you want me to tell you what it's called, or?
Yeah, it'd be lovely. Yeah, because I did get some, medication from because I went through a private referral because I was really overwhelmed by the process that you talked about, and actually at the time, I didn't know anything about Right to Choose and all that kind of stuff, so and for me, when I went back to get t I thought, "Actually, I'm really nervous of medication," like you were talking about, I'm not great at taking tablets, firstly, because I forget, secondly, because of that, because I'm worried about what they're gonna do,
Mm.
and because it's obviously messing with you, it's obviously changing things in your mind, and that really kind of it scares me a lot. So I did go and get some. When you're having a bad day, you think, "Gosh, I need to." Some days when I need to focus, and I do have stimulant ones, and they're downstairs, and they're still sealed in the box. And one day I am going to try. I'm going to try them, but it'd be interesting to know which ones you've got. I'll see if they're the same because I can't remember what mine are called because they're always the worst possible name that you can't
Yeah,
remember.
they always are. Mine, I mean, I'm dyslexic, so here we go. I'll
It's
try.
even worse.
Oh,
Yeah, go on.
these are this one, no, it's actually really bad that I've not actually looked at what they're called until now, which is just ADHD for you, isn't it, that? Um, these are Elevance.
Okay.
Yeah, Elevance capsules, hard capsules, 20 milligram.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean to say that if you know, somebody else tried that, this particular one, that it would work for them, because
Yeah,
everybody,
sure.
but, you know, but for me, so far, so good. I can't remember which the last ones that I took were. Some
Mm.
still have them somewhere. I'll find them 10 years later. But yeah. So yeah, so far so good. But like I say, I'm on very low dosage, and my main thing at the moment is just trying to remember to take them.
Yeah, it does make me laugh, doesn't it? When someone says, "Oh, well, you get addicted to them," and you're like, "Okay, there's not a chance on this earth I'm going to be addicted to tablets when I can't even remember to take them."
Yeah, this is it. But you know what? I do worry a little bit, you know, because I do have quite an addictive personality. Sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. But
Yeah,
you know, you can become very, you know, into something, and then you're not anymore, and you move on to the next thing, and that is a bit of a concern for me. Um,
yeah,
I could become, and I haven't got to that point yet. I think what's really good is that because I have a clinician every 2 weeks, and I'm very open with her to sort of how things are going. And if I ever get to that point where I feel like I'm really dependent on them, that I'd have to address that and look at ways to kind of support me, because obviously that's not good. And you don't want to, and ultimately, you know, I don't, I'd like to be, I think I'd like to be medication free. Um, but realistically, I don't know. You know, all I know is that every single day for me, I feel like I battle life, and
yeah,
I don't want to have to do that. And I want to really focus on all the positive areas of
yeah,
ADHD and autism. And if that currently can help with medication, then that for me is kind of the route I want to go down. But what's great is that I can just suddenly go, do you know what, not for me, and I don't have to do a slow transition. So
yeah.
yeah,
That's good. It makes
Oh,
so much sense what you've
it
said,
it's very
because
interesting because I
yeah,
think because it's not something that
mm,
I've been through or anything, and I think the more I hear, even Sophie, you sharing that you don't have to take it every day.
mm, mm,
That's really different from a lot of medication, and I think something that not everybody would know or understand, or even the challenge, because I think the assumption is, isn't it, well, you've been diagnosed, so you must have immediately been offered medication, but that's just not the case at all. But it's just interesting understanding the whole journey. And Sophie, I can't imagine what your initial thoughts were when they were like, yes, you've been diagnosed, but now you have to go down this pathway so that we can look at medication. That must just be,
it was like they dangled a carrot and then they took it
yeah,
away. And when
yeah,
now, you know, there's nothing we can do. And you do feel very kind of, when you do get that diagnosis, you do suddenly feel like, well, what now? And there isn't anything. And from my experience, and you know, a lot of people that I know that have had diagnosis, that it is very much a, well, here's your diagnosis, and now you kind of need to just go and
yeah,
crack on. And
yeah.
it's,
It's the
you know,
hard,
it's
yeah.
hard because it's like, well, I'm now aware that I have this diagnosis, and so I need to put support in place to help me going forward. And there isn't anything unless you fight and scream.
Especially when you've got children as well, isn't it? I think when I found when I was at school, and obviously we didn't, neither you or I knew about having this condition, but at school it was always not being able to focus and looking like you weren't making any effort, and kind of masking, deep masking. But then when you kind of move into teenage years, I found like I was really struggling. I was anxious quite a lot. So I used to drink alcohol a lot because it would just take all of that away for the temporarily till I had the worst hangover and anxiety the next day. But then when you have children, that's the next level, that is, because they've got, usually if you're neurodivergent, they usually are as well. Not always, but of course it is genetic, isn't it? So it's and then you're struggling with all the tasks and all the stuff in school, primary school, like, oh, you've got to remember all these things. It's a cake sale, it's this, it's that, and you're working. I think it's a whole new level. And then you get through that, and then you hit with menopause. So again, you don't know about ADHD, you've got menopause and then any other medical conditions. I mean, yeah, Sunday night, I was like having, I was just, when you just hit the wall with it, I thought it's so exhausting sometimes that you carry on masking it because you don't want to make a fuss and you don't like the attention, you don't want people
Mm,
fussing around you.
mm,
But actually, like you say, there's brilliant, brilliant strengths with ADHD and autism and all neurodivergent conditions. They're fantastic. And
mm,
that's the same as you, like we go look at it from a strengths perspective, but it doesn't mean that every day is not hard and it so much effort just to get through. And then the next day the clock's reset and you're like, oh, I've got to take the dog out all over again. And oh, God, how can I get into this routine where it's just
yeah.
doesn't take so much effort?
Yeah, it like I mentioned before, having my diagnosis has definitely allowed me to be kinder to myself because when I do have days and those days come and sometimes they can really hit hard and I'm really burnt out and I have to sleep all day until I pick the kids up, or
Yeah.
I will feel quite low in my mood. uh, I now kind of I accept it. Before, I think I tried to push so hard to not have it, and because I didn't understand why I was having it, and I was just I hated myself, and I was like, "I don't wanna be like this. I wanna be like that person. I don't like this." So I forced myself to mask and fake and pretend and have all that negative energy on myself. It's not been until my, like, late 30s and having my diagnosis that I've really accepted who I am. I love myself for who I am, and I'm kinder to myself, and that has all come from diagnosis. Like I would
Yeah.
not be here without that where I am
No.
now. Um,
And I think when people do make those comments about why do you want the diagnosis, this is a great episode to listen to help understand because many of us are married to neurotypicals who don't necessarily understand what we're going through. Or we might work. I mean, Kerry and I work together fantastically because we're the kind of missing pieces of each other. Kerry's got a different mind to me, and I have to her, and that works really well.
Mm.
Um, but I think in relationships, it can cause real stress and pressure. And what we've done an episode on relationships, and I've shared openly and very honestly, probably too honestly, about my past relationships and the struggles with those. But I never understood what was causing it, and I thought now I know.
Mm.
Um, and it's like wow. So when people don't really understand it, I think hopefully this episode will really help neurotypical partners, business partners, colleagues, team, leaders of people try and understand because I think the worst thing to hear when you have finally plucked up the courage and actually got your life together enough to go and get a diagnosis, because that's overwhelming in itself. The last thing you want to hear is, why do you want to go and do that? Okay. Well, it's very, very hard then to explain, and you suddenly feel like you're in a defense position of having to defend yourself. And actually, well, you want to know how you work and where you best
Yes.
thrive and what environments you best work in and why you've had these challenges over your lifetime. I mean, it's hopefully this really helps people just unlock that and
mm,
kind of change the question.
mm, mm. Yeah, and you touched on something that actually is so important within the workplace. And actually, what you find is that once you do have that diagnosis, if employers supported you better, they would ultimately benefit because they're going to get the best of you. They're going to get all those positive, amazing, hyper focus, working really, really hard. If they
Mhm.
just put some support in, like coaching or, having workshops that
Yeah.
explain ADHD and autism, that will ultimately benefit them so much more. So to dismiss it is only going to affect them. But that's a whole nother
Yeah.
story. That's a whole nother area.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. I think Gerard was telling us, he was on the podcast a couple of weeks back, that I think Google, did he say Google? So
Yeah.
Google only employ neurodivergent employees, or mostly, and look how fantastic their business is with creativity and automation and innovation. Amazing. So I think when people start thinking about this differently and framing it differently and looking at it from a strengths perspective, you're going to have so many people in organizations in the wrong jobs that
Mhm.
actually, if you took them out, understood all of their strengths, and put them in a job that they really thrived in,
Mm,
you're unlocking unlocking that person's potential, and you're going to get way more from them.
Yeah.
It's so straightforward, isn't it?
Mm,
Um, but it requires mindset shift, easy for me to say,
mm,
in organisations. But
mm,
hopefully all the work that we're doing, all of us together, and will help that.
mm. And I definitely think, if we look back when we were children, how far we have actually come. And yes, we've got a long, 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 long way to go. But actually, there's so much more talk now about it and acceptance. And, I speak about it really openly. And so everybody I speak to is now like, knows somebody who is autistic or ADHD, or just has an understanding and sees it completely differently. So
Yeah,
we have moved on immensely, but obviously there is still a long way to go, and there's still obviously the talk of people over diagnosing. And
right.
now, because it's spoken about more and people are going, okay, then they're going getting this diagnosis, and now it's looked upon as we're over diagnosing. It's there's positives and negatives, but it's
Yeah,
great that we are starting to see it and appreciate it and understand it much more.
yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant. Well, I don't know about you, but I have really, this has been one of my favourite episodes so far. And I think the discussion has been fantastic. So thank you, Sophie, for joining Kerry and I in detention. We haven't actually asked you if you were in detention at school. We always ask everyone that comes on this podcast because it's aptly named, because most of us were in trouble at school or not, or masked all the way through it.
Do you know what? I was the complete opposite. I masked so heavily. And I think this was probably my autism more so, that I stuck to the rules and wanted to basically not be seen. And
Yeah,
I just kept my head down and, yeah, just masked constantly, and would come home and, oh gosh, looking back now, I'm like, how on earth was this missed? Oh my
yeah,
goodness. But I'd come home, I wouldn't eat all day at school. I'd come home, I'd sit and eat on my bed, all my food, and I'd just not speak to anybody.
yeah.
But I was a good girl. When I got into my teenage years, old.
The
um
dials change.
yeah, yeah, it's all or nothing with me.
Yeah,
So yeah, school, I was very much a quiet, mask lost person child.
yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really helpful, isn't it? Because I think you're right with the autism, it can make you more, you're afraid to break the rules and you follow the rules more. Whereas when the ADHD takes a bit of a lead, it's a completely different story, isn't it? So, but thank you so much, Sophie, for sharing that. Kerry and I have loved having you in detention,
Yeah.
and we hope that you'll come back and join us again for another episode, because there's so many great things that you've got to talk about. But if you've enjoyed this episode, obviously give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we will see you again next week with more detentions.